Greetings everyone. Here are the main points of today's video. Germany breaks an 80-year curse, sending heavy war machines close to the Russian border. What fatal mistake completely upended the Kremlin's deepest calculations, forcing Berlin to shed decades of hesitation to build the strongest military in Europe? Inside the new war machine, the destructive power of the 45th Armored Brigade, and the nature of Plan B to prepare for the possibility of the U.S. nuclear umbrella turning its back. The secret German-Ukrainian data alliance behind the agreement to transfer 4 years of Kiev's hard-earned combat experience and Germany's military AI brainpower. Here are the details and in-depth analysis. Before we get into the content, I hope you can take a few seconds to like the video and subscribe to the channel so we can keep going, because it's free. Thank you, everyone. A move to deter Putin by countering hypersonic missiles and building billion-dollar fortresses to stop the Kremlin. Ladies and gentlemen, on the world military map, there is a narrow strip of land full of dangers, which strategic analysts have dubbed the most dangerous place on the planet, the Suwalki Corridor. Only about 60 to 65 kilometers long, located in the southwest corner of Lithuania, this small geopolitical area is the only land route connecting the 3 Baltic countries, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, with the rest of the NATO alliance. The situation here is quite tragic, as the terrain completely favors the attacker. The flat fields mixed with dense forests and a few scattered lakes are intersected by only 2 main highways and a single railway line, turning the Baltic region into a natural bottleneck that can easily be choked off. The worst-case scenario, with devastating consequences, would be a simultaneous pincer attack from Russia's Kaliningrad military region in the west and from Belarusian territory in the east, converging right at this narrow strip of land. In just 2 to 3 days, the Suwalki Corridor would be completely cut off, isolating more than 6 million NATO citizens from Allied reinforcements. At that point, the terrifying weapons from Kaliningrad would come into play, with Iskander ballistic missiles putting Warsaw and Berlin within their sights. The S-400 air defense system establishes an anti-access shield covering most of the Baltic Sea, and MiG-31 fighter jets armed with hypersonic missiles threaten every target within a 2,000-kilometer radius. At that time, the entire Baltic region would turn into isolated islands surrounded by a ring of fire, completely blockaded on land, at sea, and in the air. This objective isn't just about occupying territory. The 2026 report from the Belfer Center at Harvard University clearly outlined the nature and ambitions of the Kremlin in the Baltic region, which are to undermine the credibility and cohesion of the NATO alliance. To achieve that, Russia could use an external pretext, such as establishing a humanitarian corridor to Kaliningrad, quickly gaining firepower superiority with drones, and combining deception tactics with rapid maneuvers. The ultimate goal is to create a fait accompli, putting the West in front of a predetermined situation to paralyze the decision-making process, which requires consensus from 32 member states. In previous grim hypothetical scenarios, the most concerning aspect for Maxix was actually Germany, as Berlin always prioritized diplomatic solutions, serving economic interests, and showed hesitation toward a swift military intervention. The irony at the present time is that even though Russia's ground forces in Kaliningrad have been reduced by up to 80% due to having to focus on the war of attrition in Ukraine, the threat of a sudden, combined asymmetric strike still looms, forcing the European security situation to find a vital solution to this existential problem. It is precisely because of this gap in thinking that, for many years, Russian President Vladimir Putin has maintained an absolute belief that Germany would never dare to take any serious military action. The burden of guilt from the history of world wars, deep dependence on cheap energy sources, and decades of military timidity from Berlin are the strategic cards that the Russian leader trusts most when calculating his moves on the geopolitical chessboard. Inside the new war machine, however, her family's steadfastness has now completely collapsed in the face of harsh reality, confronted by the imminent threat in Shandong. Germany, once known for its conservatism, has carried out a budget revolution worth tens of billions of dollars, abandoning strict fiscal discipline to focus resources on national defense, with the ultimate goal of building the strongest military in Europe. The veil of timidity that lasted for 80 years has been torn apart, rendering the Kremlin's deepest calculations meaningless. The most vivid and dramatic evidence of this great transformation is the appearance of Germany's 45th Armored Brigade on Lithuanian soil, marking the first time since World War II that Berlin has permanently deployed an armored force abroad. chosen location is highly provocative and sensitive. The Poprad base in the military forest area near Ningzerninkai, just 20 kilometers from the Belarusian border. This is just the tip of the iceberg for a new military resurgence. Currently, about 1,000 to 1,400 German soldiers are present, and this number is increasing every day, aiming for a permanent garrison of 5,000 troops by the end of 2027. Let's look back at modern history to see the magnitude of the changes since 2017. NATO only maintained rotating battalions here, about 1,600 soldiers completely lacking heavy equipment. The mission of those rotating units was not to prevent an invasion, but to serve as a tripwire, willing to sacrifice themselves to send a warning signal to NATO headquarters that an attack had begun. Now, where the 45th Brigade appears as a completely different entity, a powerful heavy war machine equipped with the most advanced weapons of the German defense industry, Leopard 2 A8 main battle tanks, Puma infantry fighting vehicles, Panzerhaubitze, 2,000 self-propelled howitzers along with drone teams, and the most advanced electronic warfare equipment. Not stopping there, this force also integrates and leads NATO's multinational battle group, consisting of soldiers from the Netherlands, Norway, the Czech Republic, Belgium, and Luxembourg. The question on the military chessboard is no longer whether NATO will detect the attack in time, but rather that NATO will immediately crush the aggressor with a lightning counterattack. This permanent presence is deeply embedded in every brick of the massive infrastructure project worth over 1 billion euros. It's not just fortifications and ammo depots. A third of German soldiers will bring their families. Modern housing complexes, medical centers, German language schools and kindergartens are springing up like mushrooms in Vilnius and Kaunas, with Phase 1 completed by the Lithuanian Ministry of Defense 10 months ahead of schedule. Once these civilian and military facilities are completed, reversing the decision to station troops there will be politically impossible. It is precisely this irreversible commitment that serves as the ultimate deterrent weapon, an unshakable steel wall, ready to activate Article 5 on collective defense of NATO. From the very first moment, the tank tracks clash and engage with enemy fire. It took Germany 33 years of delay to finally reach the 2% defense budget milestone for the first time in 2024. It was against that gloomy backdrop that the 2026 budget boost created a real shockwave in the global geopolitical community. Germany's annual defense budget jumped from 63 billion last year to a record 82.7 billion euros, plus an additional injection of 25.5 billion euros from the special fund, marking a historic turning point. Berlin's total defense budget reached a massive 108 billion euros, which is nearly double France's military budget. However, the real structural breakthrough does not lie in the numbers, but in a major constitutional overhaul. In March 2025, Prime Minister Friedrich Merz took a bold step by completely exempting defense spending from Germany's constitutional debt ceiling mechanism. This historic decision unlocked credit capacity of up to 500 billion euros, causing federal borrowing to soar to 174 billion euros in just 1 year. Now, Berlin has turned rearmament from a temporary crisis response into a lasting national obligation, with the goal of further increasing the defense budget by 53 billion euros by 2029. Defense Minister Boris Pistorik's determination goes even further than just the numbers on paper. He is determined to transform the German armed forces into the most powerful conventional military force in Europe by 2030, with 460,000 soldiers always ready for combat. A strategic question arises. Where is this torrent of money going? Data from the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, SIPRI, shows that military spending by NATO members in Europe is rising at the fastest rate since 1953, and the driving force behind this arms race is Germany. The scale of ordered military equipment is unprecedented, with 1,000 main battle tanks included, Leopard 2 A8 tanks, 3,500 Boxer armored vehicles, more than 20 advanced Eurofighter jets, along with a separate national military satellite network. At the same time, the 2026 budget also paves the way for the immediate recruitment of 10,000 new soldiers and 2,000 civilian staff. Analysts believe that this sense of urgency is not an unfounded military paranoia, especially after the suspected Russian-backed sabotage attack on the facilities of the giant defense industry corporation, Zemito, in Erfurt in June 2025. The timing for Germany to play this strategic card also coincides with major cracks in Kaliningrad's defenses. Due to the mounting pressure from the war of attrition in Ukraine, the Kremlin was forced to withdraw its most elite units from this overseas territory and send them to the front. Russian Baltic Fleet warships were redeployed to the Black Sea, and part of the elite S-400 air defense system was also confirmed to have been moved to the Ukrainian battlefield. Although the Kaliningrad region still maintains considerable strength in its missile stockpile and air defense capabilities, its ground combat capability has been severely eroded by up to 80%. Germany's deployment of a permanent armored brigade to Lithuania during this period of Russian weakness is a calculated move, fully exploiting the strategic gap of the opponent. Beyond boosting its own capabilities, Berlin's strategic partnership with Kyiv is fundamentally altering the security equation facing the Kremlin. German-Ukrainian Data Alliance on April 14, 2026. President Volodymyr Zelensky made a historic visit to Berlin. 10 separate agreements signed that day carried enough weight to completely shift the trajectory of the war. Germany and Ukraine upgraded their relationship to a comprehensive strategic partnership, accompanied by Prime Minister Friedrich's strong statement, asserting that Russia has absolutely no chance of winning this war. Behind those strong statements are concrete commitments. 6 memorandums of deep cooperation between the two countries' defense industry corporations have been approved. The content of these agreements goes far beyond the limits of ordinary arms aid shipments. Germany and Ukraine are working together to activate a drone production line, where the long-range Anubis UAVs and medium-range SES UAVs will be manufactured by joint venture companies from both countries. 3 independent long-range cruise missile and ballistic missile development projects are also a key part of the agreement. For now, PAC-2G missiles for the Patriot air defense system and 36 modern Air-SS launchers will be urgently delivered to Ukraine. However, what surprises observers the most lies in the commercial clause aimed at third countries. When the two countries agreed to cooperate in exporting medium drones to the international market, including Gulf countries, this move shows Germany aims to meet its defense needs and join Ukraine in capturing the global defense market. However, the greatest strategic depth of this alliance does not lie in weapons or money, but in the flow of data. An exclusive agreement has been signed to share data from Ukraine's Delta battlefield coordination system to train military artificial intelligence models for Germany. This means that 4 years of Ukraine's blood-soaked combat experience, from which weapons are effective in which conditions, to the tactical behavior patterns of the Russian army, to vital lessons of success and failure in a harsh electronic warfare environment, are now being digitized and fed directly into the artificial brain of the German military. The 15-page statement released by the Office of the President of Ukraine clearly states that by 2026, Germany will have become Ukraine's most important bilateral partner in the field of security. The Kremlin's counteroffensive has now become more deadlocked than ever, as they are no longer fighting a solitary Ukraine, but must face a Ukraine backed by Europe's largest industrial power, capable of independently producing missiles and UAVs, and possessing an artificial intelligence system fueled by a massive database of real battlefield data. The Kremlin is not sitting idly by watching this shift, but has begun to launch sharp and dangerous moves to test the will of the West. The Symphony of the Gray Zone War reached a crescendo in September 2025 when Russian unmanned aerial vehicles continuously violated the airspace of a series of member countries, including Estonia, Finland, Latvia, Lithuania, Norway, Poland, and Romania, forcing the alliance to activate the Eastern Sentry campaign in response. The peak of the tension was a wave of 23 long-range drones flying straight from Belarusian territory toward Poland, but Warsaw's air defense network was only able to shoot down just 4 of them. The incident was so serious that Poland urgently invoked Article 4 of the NATO Charter for the 9th time to consult its allies. However, sabotage attacks targeting undersea fiber optic systems and vital energy infrastructure in the Baltic Sea have been increasing at an alarming rate. However, with gray zone tactics, Moscow continues to flex its military muscles to deter its opponents. The strategic exercise Zapad 2020, which took place in September 2025, escalated the atmosphere of confrontation to its peak by deeply integrating scenarios involving the use of tactical nuclear weapons. The Iskander ballistic missile system continuously carried out simulated destructive attacks. Strategic bombers roared across the sky, conducting training flights, And now hypersonic cruise missiles were also successfully test-launched in the icy Arctic region. Although President Vladimir Putin claimed that the exercise gathered up to 100,000 troops, British intelligence estimated the actual number was only about 11,000 soldiers. Delving into the heart of the Kaliningrad region, Lithuanian intelligence uncovered a large-scale Russian military restructuring aimed at establishing an entirely new Iskander ballistic missile brigade, activating a state-of-the-art radar system capable of sweeping airspace within a radius of thousands of kilometers, and upgrading current brigades to division level. Not stopping there, the announcement that the Orsnik intermediate-range ballistic missile system, a weapon capable of carrying devastating nuclear warheads, will be deployed to Belarus would send shockwaves across the geopolitical chessboard. President Alexander Lukashenko did not hesitate to emphasize the terrifying nuclear nature of this weapon, while Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Alexander Rusko brushed aside all diplomatic protocol with a stern warning that any attempt to blockade or isolate Kaliningrad would face the most catastrophic consequences, and NATO's chances of victory would be absolutely zero. So, in your opinion, with Germany stepping in to help Ukraine and NATO, can Putin's Russia fight back?